Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're immersing ourselves in the complex world of Sri Lanka, often called the Pearl of the Indian Ocean. Specifically, we're looking at the rise of its tourism industry and, well, its impact. Both sides of the coin.
That's right. And our focus really is to kind of perform a deep analysis for you. We want to understand how a nation leverages its heritage, its beauty for huge economic gain, but also what the potential costs are.
And Sri Lanka has always been a draw, hasn't it? Even anciently.
Oh, absolutely. A global magnet for centuries. Our sources show foreigners arriving for millennia. You've got the ancient Greeks, traders from the Middle East.
And then the colonial powers.
Exactly. Portugal, the Netherlands, Britain, they were drawn by its natural beauty, yes, but also its economic clout, its strategic value, its culture.
So not just sightseers back then. It was a place of real significance. Trade, politics.
Precisely. And that brings up a really important point from our sources. Not every foreigner is or was a tourist in the modern sense.
Okay, how do the sources define that difference?
They draw quite a clear line. Someone there purely for commerce isn't defined as a tourist. A tourist, in this context, is someone actively seeking something else.
Like the experience itself.
Yes, the vibe, you could say. Things like climate comfort, maybe spiritual well-being, the appeal of a simpler life, the natural beauty, relaxation, and definitely the history. It's about seeking that cultural and aesthetic benefit, you know.
Got it. So it's intentional travel for those specific reasons.
Exactly.
So when does this shift happen? When does this long history of attracting visitors turn into a formal, structured industry? Because that feels like the real starting point for our deep dive.
Well, the modern development really gets going in the 1960s. It wasn't smooth sailing, mind you. There were ups and downs.
Sure. Typical for any new industry.
But the key foundational moment seems to be 1966. That's when the government stepped in with the Ceylon Tourist Board Act and the Ceylon Hotels Corporation Act.
Ah, the regulatory framework.
Yeah.
Setting the stage.
That was the official green light, really. The scaffolding needed to turn all that natural appeal into a proper economic sector.
Okay, so the 60s lay the groundwork. But then there's a moment, isn't there, where things really accelerate. 1977 comes up a lot in the material.
Yes, 1977 is crucial. That's the turning point. It's when the open economic policy was implemented.
And what did that policy actually do to boost tourism so dramatically?
It was a massive catalyst. It wasn't just one thing. It created real opportunities for foreign investors to come in.
Okay, attracting capital.
Exactly. Plus, new trade policies were implemented, and critically, currency restrictions were eased. It made doing business and traveling much easier.
So Sri Lanka essentially hung out a big open for business sign for tourism.
You could say that. They rolled out the red carpet for international capital and, yeah, mass tourism development.
And the impact on revenue, I imagine that was pretty immediate.
Oh, it was huge. The money started flowing and fast. The growth wasn't just steady. It was, well, almost exponential for a while.
Let's look at those numbers. You mentioned they were small before this period.
Relatively speaking, yes. Back in 1963, foreign exchange earnings from tourism were about Rs. 6 million.
Okay, starting point.
Then jumped to 1969, it's up to Rs. 17 million, still modest. But after that 1977 policy,
That's when it takes off.
big time. By 1980, just 3 years later, earnings hit Rs. 1,830 million.
Wow, that's a massive leap.
It is. And that corresponded to about 321,780 tourist arrivals that year. The very next year, 1981, arrivals jumped another 39%.
Incredible growth. And it continued.
It did, despite some bumps later on. By 1992, the sources note earnings reached Rs. 18,500 million.
So from 6 million in 63 to over 18 billion by 92, that's roughly a 3,000 times increase, not 300. Incredible.
Yes. Checking my notes, 18,500 million. You're right. A staggering increase. It really confirms the power of that policy shift and the international appeal.
Sustaining that kind of growth isn't just about policy, though.
Right.
You need the capacity, right? What else allowed them to handle that influx?
Well, it points to significant investment, likely spurred by that foreign capital, building hotels, improving transport, and also diversifying the appeal, which leads us to who was actually visiting.
Right. Where were all these tourists coming from?
The sources indicate that over the decade or so they focus on, the clear majority came from Western European countries.
Which ones specifically?
Germany, France, the UK, Italy, those were the big players.
Okay, the traditional European markets.
Yes, but it wasn't only Europe. There were significant numbers coming from the United States, Japan, nearby India, and the Netherlands, too. It was becoming a truly global destination.
And were they all just coming for a beach holiday? Or was it more varied?
That's another key insight. While leisure and entertainment were definitely the main drivers, the visitor base was actually quite diverse in its motivations.
Yes.
A good chunk came for business activities, others for conferences, discussions, even just visiting relatives and friends.
So the growing tourism infrastructure was serving more than just pure vacationers. It had wider economic utility.
Precisely. It suggests the benefits were spreading beyond just the resorts and tour operators.
Okay, so whether someone's there for business or pleasure, what are the core attractions? What keeps drawing people in? According to the sources, we know the beaches are famous.
Absolutely. The scenic coastlines are a huge pull, and the historical ruins, places like Sigiriya, Anuradhapura, they're world-renowned.
What else?
The Central Highlands, the hill country, known locally as Kandukara, stunning landscapes, plus numerous religious and cultural sites that are deeply important.
So the tangible things, landscape, history, culture.
Yes, but what's fascinating is that the sources also highlight less tangible things you experience more subjectively.
Like what? The food.
Exactly. The delicious cuisine, food, and drink are specifically mentioned, and, importantly, the people.
Ah, the hospitality.
Yes, the sources note the courtesy and polite nature of the Sri Lankan people as a significant draw. It means those cultural interactions, the sensory experiences, are just as vital to tourism success as the beaches or ancient cities.
That makes sense. The overall feel of a place.
Right.
Okay, let's pivot then. We've seen the massive economic growth, the influx of visitors. What were the positive impacts on Sri Lankan society itself, beyond just the raw foreign exchange figures?
Well, the most direct benefit highlighted is job creation, tackling unemployment.
How so? Directly and indirectly.
Both. Direct jobs are the obvious ones. Working in hotels, guest houses, driving tourist transport, working in entertainment venues, travel
The
agencies.
standard tourism jobs.
Right. But the indirect income generation, that's where the impact often spreads much wider through the community.
Like ripple effects.
Exactly. Think about all the associated industries that spring up or get a boost. People making batik clothing, for example.
Like crafts.
Yes, ornamental goods, items made from gold, silver, brass, beautiful wood carvings. And think about food, countless small restaurants, roadside stalls, vendors.
So it provides supplemental income for many people who aren't directly employed by a big hotel chain.
Precisely. It fosters this whole ecosystem around the core tourist activities.
What about bigger picture development? Infrastructure, cities.
That's another significant positive mentioned. Tourism kind of creates a demand for certain standards.
Like cleaner cities.
Yes, a necessity for clean and beautiful urban areas. It can spur creative construction, better urban planning, and critically, it forces investment in infrastructure, expanding roads, airports to handle the flow of visitors.
Makes sense. You need to be able to move people around.
And an interesting point made is the protection of scenic coastal areas. If your beaches are a prime asset generating millions.
You have a strong economic incentive to protect them.
Right. It doesn't always work perfectly, but the incentive is there.
And what about culture? Does tourism help preserve traditions?
The sources suggest it can, yes. There's mention of the development and even renewal of traditional art forms.
How does that work?
Well, if there's a market for it, tourists wanting to see traditional dances, rituals, buy traditional crafts, it creates an economic reason to keep those traditions alive.
So things like
Ah,
the upcountry and lowcountry dances, Bali Thoval rituals, masks.
exactly those examples. When tourists show interest and are willing to pay, it encourages the preservation, the practice, even innovation within those forms. The tourist economy, in a way, helps subsidize cultural retention.
It's a compelling argument for the positive side. Jobs, income, infrastructure, even cultural preservation.
It definitely paints a picture of significant benefits.
But, and there's always a but, isn't there? We have to look at the other side, the potential downsides, the negative impacts.
Absolutely. And the sources are quite frank about this. They explicitly warn against forgetting the harm done to the daily lives of the local population, even amidst all the focus on foreign exchange earnings.
The hidden costs, where does that start?
It often starts with what's termed cultural erosion.
Okay, explain that. Is it just about change?
It's more about the pace and nature of the change driven by external forces. The concern is that rapid modernization, catering to tourist demands and norms, can start to chip away at Sri Lanka's unique, multidimensional culture. A culture, remember, that's been valued globally for thousands of years.
So the very thing tourists might be coming to see is potentially threatened by their arrival.
That's the paradox. Tourist preferences, behaviors, economic pressures, they can fundamentally alter traditional ways of life, sometimes very quickly and not always for the better from a local perspective.
Beyond those cultural shifts, the sources point to some really severe social problems directly linked to tourism growth.
Yes, unfortunately, this is where the picture gets darker. The sources detail a significant increase in drug use.
How bad?
It's described starkly as becoming a plague affecting modern youth, particularly in tourist hotspots.
That's a strong word. Plague.
It indicates a very serious problem. And alongside that, there's the documented growth of prostitution,
Where was this occurring?
primarily in the main urban centers like Colombo and Kandy, but also in key coastal resort areas. Hikkaduwa, Bentota, and Negombo are mentioned.
And the sources mention exploitation involved.
Tragically, yes. The sources state it sometimes involves not just women, but also small children. It's a deeply disturbing consequence.
And inevitably linked to that.
Is the spread of social diseases. The sources connect this directly to the activities associated with some segments of the tourist influx and the related sex trade. It paints a very difficult picture.
It really does. Economic growth on one hand, but seemingly fueling social degradation and serious exploitation on the other.
It highlights the extreme vulnerability that can come with relying heavily on this kind of industry. And that vulnerability isn't just social.
You mean economically vulnerable too?
Absolutely. The entire tourism sector is incredibly sensitive to instability and conflict.
So the engine can just stop.
Almost instantly. The sources point to the political turmoil Sri Lanka experienced in the 1980s.
What happened to tourism then?
Arrivals plummeted, dramatically reduced numbers, and that meant significant immediate job losses across the sector. People who relied on that income were suddenly left with nothing.
A sharp reminder of how fragile it can be.
And that vulnerability hasn't gone away. Even in more recent times discussed by the sources, safety and security fears are cited as a primary reason potential tourists choose not to visit.
So perception matters hugely if things feel unsafe.
The lifeblood of the industry can dry up very quickly. Security concerns are a constant shadow.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize this for you, the listener. We've traced a journey here. Sri Lankan tourism starts with ancient appeal, formalizes in the 60s, explodes after 1977's open policies.
Generating unprecedented revenue, billions of rupees, creating jobs both directly and indirectly, spurring infrastructure development, roads, airports, even helping in some ways to preserve traditional arts and crafts.
But that success story runs parallel to a much darker narrative.
Yes, the potential erosion of a deeply rooted culture under the pressure of modernization and foreign influence, and severe social ills, rising drug use described as a plague, the growth of prostitution, including child exploitation, and the spread of disease.
And underlying it all, this constant economic fragility, the entire industry hostage to political stability and perceptions of safety.
It lays bare this core paradox, doesn't it? Tourism as this incredibly powerful economic engine,
Generating wealth, opportunity,
but simultaneously posing immense risks to the very cultural fabric and social health that arguably made the place attractive to begin with. You really do have to weigh those scales. Is the financial gain ultimately worth the social cost?
which brings us to the final thought we want to leave you with. Something to really mull over.
Yeah.
How does a nation, any nation, really, facing this, successfully harness the undeniable financial power of tourism? How do you maximize those benefits?
While also putting up rigorous safeguards. Protections for the cultural authenticity, the social well-being, the historical integrity that drew people there in the first place.
It's this constant balancing act, isn't it? Finding that sustainable equilibrium between profit and preservation.
Especially when, as we've seen, one can so easily undermine the other. It's a profound challenge for policymakers, for communities, for everyone involved.
A challenge indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the complex story of tourism in Sri Lanka. We hope this analysis gives you plenty to think about.
We'll see you next time.